Hey guys, what's going on? Shane here again for another video with the beautiful Husky FE501S. I've had this bike now for about, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, and I've been meaning to do a first impressions video on the bike in its stock form. I have since modified it, from a couple days ago. And so I finally wanted to just go over the bike and kind of give you guys my first impression of the bike in its stock form. Okay, so first and foremost, we're just going to get straight into it and talk about the easiest thing to talk about, and that's the power. It's a 500cc four-stroke motor. It's the same identical motor that's in the KTM 500 EXE. It makes 58 horsepower, I believe, at the crank, and I'm not sure about the torque figure, but to just be blunt, it's got a fuck ton of power, especially on the dirt. The reason why I wanted the 501 compared to the 350 was because I wanted that extra power on the street, and also when it comes to riding at 6, 7, 8,000 feet elevation, it's really nice to have that extra power. See, down at sea level where we're at right now, it's about 20 feet elevation. That really doesn't matter, and it doesn't come into play. But when you really get up in the mountains, especially here in the Sierra Nevadas, and probably even more so in somewhere like Colorado or anywhere else or some other places, you can really feel the loss of power on a lot of other bikes that have a lot less power to begin with. So that's why I opted for the 500cc bike. It's got so much power, so much grunt, and it just keeps pulling through every gear. It doesn't matter what gear you're in. Along with all the horsepower, this bike has a ton of torque. Even with the gearing being so tall, it really doesn't matter what gear you're in. If you're getting on it, you are definitely accelerating. Now, that's going to kind of lead me into the next thing I want to talk about, and that's the gearing for this bike. For this bike to pass the emission specs, KTM, because they're the ones, it's their motor essentially, and Husqvarna, for this bike to be street legal, it's a 25 mile an hour, from what I believe, it's a 25 mile an hour test, and I think it has to do with not only noise, but how much emissions it's putting off at that given miles per hour. So the gearing on this bike, it's a 15 tooth front, 45 tooth rear sprocket. It is way too high, ridiculously high. Just for some examples, when I did single track, the first time I took it off-road, I had to slip the clutch quite a bit in first gear, which made the bike run probably a little bit hotter than I wanted it to, especially for being a brand new bike, but that's what they have to do. So that's definitely something that you should look at changing if you're looking at getting a bike like this, especially, well, the one with the plate, because the gearing is very high. Another example of that is if you are going 65 miles an hour on the highway and you're in 6th gear, the gearing is so tall that when you actually go to get on it, it feels like the bike is actually bogging down because the RPMs are way too low at that miles per hour. I opted going for a 13 tooth sprocket in the front and a 48 in the rear because that's the most I could go for the stock chain. When I finally decide to get a new one, I might go I'm going to keep the front 13 and I might go to 50 or 52 in the rear, depending on what I'm going to be riding, my riding style is, and where I'm going to be riding at the time. So I'm not going to comment on that yet. I'm just going to talk about this, the stock gearing, like I said. So stock gearing, way too tall from the factory, but it's to pass the emissions, so it's just expect that if you're going to get a bike like this, either the KTM 500 EXE or the Husky FE501S, you are going to be changing the gearing on it because it is far too tall, even for the street. One thing that you have to remember when you're buying a bike like this is it is 99% dirt bike. The only stuff that's on there is the turn signals, the emissions crap, headlight, speedo. It is a 99% dirt bike, so it's not really meant to be ridden on the street. for long periods of time. Now, not that you can't, you can easily make this into a supermoto and have a blast with it. But the tires on this are 100% dirt bike, besides the fact that they are DOT approved. So, and they're also unbalanced. The tires, they're not balanced. So anything above, let's say like 55, 60, and the vibes are definitely, you can definitely feel it through the handlebars and the foot pegs. And I'm talking about on the street. On the dirt, it's completely different. It's completely different. But on the street, where it's a nice smooth surface, this bike is it's not at home doing highway speeds. You can do it, yes you can, but it's just not at home, especially with the tires that are on it. If you got maybe a little bit less aggressive tires and you got them balanced, it'd probably be far better. But in this application, it's not really designed for highway speeds. Not that I'm complaining. This is basically a dirt bike for me, and just to get from trail to trail and maybe mess around town or whatever. But it's not meant to be ridden for long periods of time on the highway. The next thing I want to talk about is the suspension. I'm not a suspension guru by any means. I can only compare between this bike and the bike I had before this. The bike I had before this was YZ450F, Yamaha, and I had that bike for about 3 years. So coming from that suspension to this, it's a night and day difference. This bike just feels so much more planted. The suspension is just so plush and refined. It gives you a lot of confidence when riding on the dirt. And I was never one before I had this bike. I never really thought suspension was the biggest deal, because I wasn't going to spend extra money on that type of stuff. That's just me. But coming to this suspension, it's on point, and luckily I weigh like I'm the perfect weight for the stock spring, so that makes it even better for me. Now let's talk about the seat height. The seat height is like 38.2 inches tall, which is very tall. I am 6 foot, 180 pounds, and I'm pretty much on my tippy toes, just kind of like riding around in like jeans and stuff like that. When I have all my gear on, my boots, my jersey, my chest protector, I always ride with a camelback as well, and my tool bag. It gets a little bit better, but it's still a little bit too tall for me. I fell a couple times the first ride out when we were doing single track, when I go to put my foot down on like a switchback or something, and I just ended up dropping the bike because it's just a tall bike. So it's not something that I'm going to change. I'm going to leave it the way it is. I'm going to adjust the sag and see if that makes it a little bit better. But in the meantime, I'm just going to live with it, and I like all that suspension travel. One of the best things I love about this bike is the weight. It is a very lightweight motorcycle. According to the manual, it's about 254 pounds, and that's the best thing without fuel. And that's one of the best things I like about this bike, is because even though it's a 500cc monster, it is still really light for what it comes with. Compare that to the FE501S or the KTM 350XE. Those bikes, I think, are only like 7 pounds lighter, and I want to say you're talking about like 12 more horsepower or something between the 350. I think 12. I'll put the correct figure up in the video, but it's around like 12 horsepower difference for only 7 pounds more. And so I think that's a freaking huge, that's an easy trade-off right there. Easy trade-off. 7 pounds more for 12 more horsepower, I'll take it any day of the week. So this bike is very nimble. Going through all the single track that I did the first ride, it was just left, right, left, right, U-turn, switch back, and it was no problem throwing this bike around, even though it's a 500cc monster. This isn't your DRZ 400 that weighs 300 pounds plus easily. This thing is a lightweight machine. It is truly amazing how light the clutch is. It does not, your finger does not get tired, even if you're messing with the clutch all the time, like riding some single track or banging through gears and then braking. It doesn't matter how much you're using the clutch. I've never had no fade problems with it. It's nice to just adjust it right on the fly with the little clicker thing. You don't have to worry about adjusting the stupid cable or worrying about that. It is amazingly good. This bike, in my opinion, needs a steering stabilizer. I mean, a lot of bikes do. It's not uncommon. It's nice to have a steering stabilizer, but it's definitely something I'm going to want to get for this bike here. I don't know, near future, whatever, next couple months or something. It'll be nice to have that. The brakes are awesome on this bike. No issues there. It's Brembo brakes around. I mean, you really can't complain. Stainless steel brake lines, front and rear. Stainless steel clutch line as well. Really top-notch components. No fade whatsoever so far from everything I've put it through. I want to talk about shifting now. Shifting on this bike is butter smooth, zero issues, very easy to clutchless upshift. But neutral can be hard to find when you're at a standstill. Compared to my YZ450F, I don't remember really having issues getting neutral. But this bike it's just a little finicky when you're at a standstill. If you are rolling to a stop, it's very easy to get in neutral. And I also wish it had a neutral light. That would be kind of nice. I feel like it would be very easy for them to have just put a little neutral light button on the dash, but I'm not complaining. It's a great bike. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was gripping the tank and my issue that I had with this bike when I went out for the single track riding and I was riding all day. There is this little lip right here, and I'll see if you guys can see it right there. Now, the issue I was having was where my knees were trying to grip were almost right at this angle whenever I was sitting down. Now, this could easily be because of my riding style and me being lazy actually and not standing up when I should have been standing up, because I was probably sitting a little bit too much, especially towards the end of the day where I was getting tired. So it might not be an issue for everyone, but I just had a little bit of issues with this angle right here and hitting this side. The bike definitely runs hot. It's a hot bike. You'll find that all over the forums. I've done some stuff to counter it, but like I said, this isn't the video for it. I just want to do initial impressions. There's a fan on the right side, and you do get a lot of hot air coming out, so you know the fan's actually doing its job and cooling the bike down for you. Even though this is a 500cc, I call it a monster because it really is. The power is very usable, and I feel like even someone who is coming from maybe like a 250 or something like that, it's very easy to jump on this bike and ride it no issues. My dad, he had a WR250 before he bought his 350. He ended up getting the 350 because I just think in the end it was better for him. But he rode my bike as well, and he had zero issues, zero complaints as far as it having too much power or, just being snatchy or anything like that as far as the throttle response. So even if you're coming from a smaller bike, there really is no issues jumping onto this bike and not being able to feel completely 100% in control. This is my first bike with fuel injection. And I'm so glad I bought it and with a starter as well. I've never had a bike with a starter or fuel injected. This thing starts every single time right away, no issues. If I drop the bike, it doesn't, flood the carb or something like that. It starts every single time, no matter what was previously happening, whether it was hot out, whether it's a cold start, whether I just dropped it and it's been laying on its side for 30 seconds or whatever. This thing starts every time, no issues, no sputtering, anything like that, zero issues. So the fuel injection is on point. I'm not saying it's perfect. It does run a little bit lean, so I will be adjusting that. But for someone who's coming from a carbureted bike, night and day difference. Fucking love it. So because this is a street legal bike, it does have turn signals, and I actually think the turn signals don't look too bad on this bike from the factory. and I'll probably keep them. I'm not worried about getting anything smaller. I don't mind them. One thing I like about them though is they're meant to bend, and I'm sure other bikes are like this too. But when you fall and you drop the bike, there's no issues with them breaking. They just bend, and then you lift it up, and you're on your way again, and your turn signal is still working. One thing to note about the graphics is this sticker on both sides is starting to peel off already. Apparently that's a common problem. They told me that at the dealer that these had issues peeling off. So eventually they'll fall off, unfortunately, because this is really the only mark on here that identifies it as the 4-stroke 501. Well guys, I think that's going to be it for today. I hopefully was as detailed as you wanted me to be. If there's anything that I left out that you have any questions about, please let me know in the comment section below. I always respond back, especially if it's a good question. And yeah guys, that's all I have for today. So look forward to more videos of this beast. It's almost 4th of July weekend, and I'm getting ready for a 4-day dirt biking / camping trip. So it's going to be a bunch of fun. So take it easy guys, and get some sleep. Peace.